Politics obviously is a personal interest I have, but there's always things that come up. I always say the good thing about buying from us locally is we're very involved in the politics of the state. I'm president of the South Dakota Firearms Industry Association. It's basically a lobby group to try to lobby for gun rights in South Dakota. Past president of the Dakota Territory Gun Collectors Association. We put on the gun shows in North Dakota and South Dakota. Some of these things are a little different. They've never really had anyone that sort of was politically involved at a state level for firearms industry. We were a victim of discrimination by banks. They didn't want to deal with us because we dealt with firearms, because we dealt with silencers. Felt like it was important for us to be proactive and say, hey, this is not fair. We shouldn't be discriminated against. We can't get a loan because we deal with a term that you don't like. We're fully legal, we're legit. I try to work very closely with politicians too, so they understand our business model. It kind of gets rid of some of the mystique. We have a huge location here in South Dakota that probably I don't focus on enough, but I think when people drive up and see $1 million building, they know that this is a legit company. I mean, you can't afford $1 million building unless you have the infrastructure and you're legit. And we have a huge sign out front, people know how to find us, but we always have a lot of political signs out there because we always try to get involved politically. So South Dakota, we've worked very closely with concealed carry issues. Honestly, first state I went to after South Dakota for a store was North Dakota. Everyone in North Dakota, in my opinion, has a concealed carry. At least they used to. Now they don't have to have a concealed carry. They've got constitutional carry. But everyone in North Dakota, in my mind, I'd say 99% of anyone that bought from us a silencer in North Dakota, they had a concealed carry. And in North Dakota, if you have a concealed carry, then there's no background check when you buy a firearm. So when you buy a rifle, handgun, anything you buy, you still have to do the paperwork, but there's no background check. The premise there is that background check's already been done. When you got the concealed carry permit, you've been vetted. You shouldn't have to continue to be vetted every time you buy a silencer. So I worked very closely with, it took me years to get this done in South Dakota, where the concealed carry permits, some of the concealed carry permits in South Dakota now, when you go to buy a firearm, you don't have a background check. And that all sort of precipitated from my experience in North Dakota, where it was easier on the customer, it was easier on the dealer. People don't realize that 10% of all transfers that happen, 10% of people that buy guns in the US get delayed. And delayed could mean that basically they want to look into your background further. You could have a name similar to someone else. Maybe the system was down, they couldn't do a thorough background check. And because of the delay, now either you don't get your firearm because maybe geographically you were driving through and now it doesn't make sense to go back and get it. Maybe it's a gun show and for you to connect back with that dealer just doesn't work. It just creates a burden. In my mind, it infringes upon your rights to own a firearm because the government's not able to give an approval when they should have. Because 99% of the time those delays end up being an actual approval. So we worked very closely with state officials, politicians in South Dakota to make changes to the concealed carry process. That was like a 3 or 4 year process, not easy. North Dakota, when I first started doing this, North Dakota had a weird law in their books. As soon as a silencer was approved, the way the law was written was the person that it was approved to had to alert their sheriff and also the DCI, Department of Criminal Investigation in Bismarck. That's the way the law read, but the state interpreted it as if the dealer had to take that ownership on, because the assumption was the customer probably didn't know that that was a state law. So every time we got an approval back, we had to send it to the state, we had to send it to the sheriff. My concern was that these documents are privacy protected, they're tax documents. And you can't share tax returns with other people without breaking the law from a privacy standpoint. So I had an attorney review the process in North Dakota, and basically his personal opinion or his legal opinion was that the law in North Dakota was a violation of federal law. So then I got into a predicament of how do I satisfy state law and federal law, doing something I didn't really feel like made sense. We actually worked with the NRA and the state of North Dakota, and that law is no longer on the books. It was not a hard sell. North Dakota wasn't doing anything with the information, and the law had been on their books forever. We felt like it was a violation of privacy, and it was additional work for state employees in North Dakota and for us. So we were able to make that disappear. I think that people don't realize that even though we're in South Dakota, we've had impacts on other states as well. The American Suppressor Association, fairly new group, we helped fund them. We became a corporate sponsor of them when we were trying to get silencers legal in Minnesota. Now it's pretty popular to be a member of that organization. Every manufacturer is essentially a member, so they have a list of members, this long. Whereas when we first became a member, it was sort of unique for a dealer to take that on. Usually it was manufacturers. We're a dealer. And we sponsored heavily, to invest into the American Suppressor Association and also the NRA, asking them to focus on getting the silencers approved in Minnesota. That went through. Then same thing in Iowa. When we first started, silencers were not legal in Iowa. So we helped through our funding through the NRA and the American Suppressor Association to help that change in Iowa. It was frustrating for us. We'd work gun shows in South Dakota. Customers come up from Minnesota and Iowa, and they're illegal. We can't even really, no need to talk to you about it. You can't buy it. So we've been very proactive politically. A lot of these challenges are hard. It's hard to get, back when silencers weren't as popular, it was hard to find someone in that state to be an advocate to say, hey, we need this. Because if they'd never used it or wasn't familiar with it, it was hard for them to be an advocate and tell their legislators, hey, we need this. Well, how do you know you need it? You never had it. It was a hard sell, and I do credit the American Suppressor Association, the NRA for educating legislators and helping it get through even in like a democratic states like more so Minnesota. I was honestly shocked when a Democratic governor signed that years ago. I mean, I think now it's getting more and more popular, so maybe that's not as hard to conceptualize, but at the time I thought, man, that's just hard to believe. I mean, we even had a rally afterwards. The American Suppressor Association, the NRA, put on this huge, half-day rally on a Friday, just like celebrating, oh my gosh, we actually got it through, and we did it at the old DPMS. They make a lot of the ARs. They have an old shooting range out there, and sort of north of the cities. We had a huge rally. It was, 4,000 or 5,000 people came. It's cool. But we really try to stay involved with, rights at a state level, also a national level. I stay involved at a national level to learn. I know that a lot of the national groups are trying to work on state issues. Sometimes it's hard to push state issues through in South Dakota, more so because people feel like it's not a huge state, doesn't impact as many people. So I feel like I try to be an advocate for, hey, we need to get that implemented at a state level here. I don't care if we don't have a huge population, it impacts us as well.